very, very fortunate today to have a person who is a real key expert in artificial intelligence, and his name is Ryan Welsh, and he's founder and CEO of KYNDI,
Yes.
KYNDI. And so I'm going to have him say a little bit about himself, and then we'll get into a couple questions so you can understand his thinking and how it can really help the military, especially with Special Operations Command.
So I'm a mathematician by training. I have a graduate degree in applied mathematics, specifically quantitative finance and mathematical economics. And I spent 7 years back in New York working for a law firm that serviced a lot of the investment banks. So think about trying to unwind all the CDSs and all the CDOs from the financial crisis. I was faced with reading all those loan documents. I was the person down there with my sleeves rolled up, reading all those documents, and I figured out at that point that, we can't read any faster than our parents or grandparents. So with that idea, I went back to business school. I went to University of Notre Dame, did my MBA, and when I got out, I had this macro thesis that by 2025, all knowledge workers like myself and like all of us will have some form of AI-enabled workflow, and that's when I started KYNDI in 2014.
Wow. So, kind of go into the future with me. I mean, where do you think this future of artificial intelligence, as we refer to as AI, for the U.S. military? What's your future vision?
Yeah, it's all about arriving at the smallest subset of meaningful information as fast as possible. Whereas on one end of the spectrum, you have the answer, which is by definition the smallest subset, right? And the other side is just all the information. And we've been incrementally getting closer and closer to be able to ask systems and get the answer back. And where AI takes us is closer to that answer. And we're not going to get there in the next 5 years of just being able to ask any question and get any answer back. But as far as filtering all that information down and really serving up the meaningful bits to analysts to look at and amplifying their intelligence and amplifying their productivity, that's ultimately where we're going with AI in the military and in the government in general.
Well, certainly I think it will help the military as far as being very effective, because, you have to have rapid decision making, and there's no such thing as perfect knowledge, as you know.
That's right.
But I think your vision certainly is right for the United States military. Let me ask you, here's some different types of questions. I'll just go into this very quickly. If we talk about machine learning techniques, and so maybe one of the things is to produce more explainable models while maintaining a high level of learning performance. And also a question about enabling human users to understand, like people like myself, appropriately trust it, and effectively manage the emerging generation of artificially intelligent partners. That's a big question.
Yeah. Explainable AI is really a key for this next step in using artificial intelligence throughout the military and even throughout other sectors like financial services and healthcare and others. And with the current wave of artificial intelligence, these kind of statistical models, you can't understand why that function is giving you an output. If you're a mathematician, you can dive in and take a look at the variables, but that's not, the average user is not going to be able to dive in on that, right? So it's, how do you have data come in, the system operate on that data, process that data, have an output, then that output is explainable to the user. And that's critical, because I can take an action as a human being, and if you were to ask me why'd you do that, I can almost always certainly tell you why.
Right.
And if I'm now going to be an analyst and have this output, put that in a report and send it up the chain of command, I almost certainly want to be able to explain my decision making to my my boss.
Sure. Okay, excellent. Well, let's take a look at how does technology address this challenge of machine learning problems to kind of classify events of interest which are heterogeneous, multimedia data. We live in that type of environment now. Especially I think if we look at UAVs and so forth, and sensors that are giving a lot of data, and it has to be processed, and it's in the form of data which is very heterogeneous and kind of multimedia data. So that's a big question.
Yeah. We've most successfully applied our algorithms to text currently. So how do you process text. We've applied those same algorithms to analyzing video and have been very successful, particularly in high cluttered scenery where a lot of the statistical models break down. And theoretically, it should also apply to audio files. It really comes down to everything in the natural world is best represented as a graph structure or a network structure. And if we can turn that into a graph and we can manipulate that graph, we can manipulate any form. So theoretically, going across text, going off videos, going across audios, you can actually tie all those pieces together, very similar to how a human being can tie all those pieces together, given all the different stimulus that they receive.
So the result is instantaneous decision making, and decision making that basically protects the warfighter.
And there's just to unpack kind of the decision making piece and because this is really a gray area that you get into with artificial intelligence is will you enable a machine to actually make a decision for someone? And there's some decisions that machines can and should make, and then there's other decisions where machines should not make those decisions. And in the military case, there are some very critical decisions that I personally believe that this computer shouldn't make. They should be tossed up to the human, and it's how do you synthesize that information down to a point where the human can consume it faster than they could previously, and then ultimately make the decision to go no-go in some cases.
I like that, because the more I think about it, I mean, that gives us a really combatant comparative edge,
absolutely.
Which is really important as we look at some of our adversaries that the nation faces today. Let's take a look at this is really a very big question here, and I might skip a little bit. How are you addressing this challenge of machine learning problems to construct decision policies? Now, so the military works on policy, so they have your mathematical formulas and so forth, and your vision, and so now they want to kind of turn this into policies for more of an autonomous system to perform a variety of stimulated missions.
Yeah, absolutely. So from the policy standpoint, as I currently understand it, and being a Silicon Valley-based technology company, we do have access to the government, but limited access in some instances. As I understand the policy making process is analysts will write reports and hopefully get set up the chain of command so that folks can make those policy decisions. So it's how do you inform better reports? How do you allow an analyst to consume more data and have a deeper reach into that data so that when a report is written and is ultimately provided to someone to make policy decisions, it is the best, most up-to-date information possible. And that's really how we think about enabling policy decisions to be made, is just having more knowledge given to the human who's still ultimately making the policy decision.
Well, I want to divert a little bit. You said Silicon Valley. Your startup is Silicon Valley.
Yeah, we can still be classified as a startup.
So, since I'm from Silicon Valley, I kind of want to share with you a little bit. So I've been, in entrepreneurship as well. So tell us a little bit about, Silicon Valley. Your experience there. Are you getting funding from any VCs?
Yeah, we've actually just closed our Series B funding last Friday or 2 Fridays ago.
Wow, congratulations.
So thank you very much. So we're growing rapidly, we're growing quickly.
That's good news.
It's institutional venture capital, so it's from some of the best VCs in the valley.
Wow,
so it's fantastic.
Excellent. Wow, I can see why you're happy, because that's not a easy pathway to go through to get funding.
No, it's not. You definitely need to have a viable business.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let me another diverted question here is so how are you reaching out to the Department of Defense, the U.S. SOCOM? Are you meeting with them? Are you getting a platform where you can say, look, I've got a startup, these processes that I've thought about and the formulas I'm putting together in my vision, this is how I can help. Are they reaching out to you? Is it easy or is it difficult?
Yeah, it's relationship driven.
Okay.
And
Good point.
yeah, and how I've attacked the problem is I knew I had a capability, or we had a capability that could address certain problems. So you hire folks, you bring folks on with those relationships. As far as being received by the government, I would say that my experience has been that the government's very open to innovation, particularly in the last I would say in the last 5 years when I really started engaging with them. And I would imagine going back to the late 90s, early 2000s, where it was difficult to get Silicon Valley companies into the government. The government's really looking out to commercial companies for solutions more and more, and not just at the one pathway or one door into the government, but each head of different groups are actively in Silicon Valley. I mean, every time I find a customer, they always tell me that they'll be in Silicon Valley the following week, so let's take a meeting. So I found that more and more folks are actually doing the rounds in Silicon Valley, and it's kind of balanced with the plane trips across the United States.
Well, there's so much talk about the government wanting to engage with the commercials, especially Silicon Valley, because they don't have any innovation. They're looking for innovation. So, I mean, you're a very good example of an innovator, right? And of course, we have a video here that's going to be put in mode here. So this is your opportunity to maybe reach out to some of those folks to make them realize that you have a very important business model that can help our policies and so forth, all the way up to I would say, Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Absolutely. We can focus on technology a lot, and we have some really great algorithms here at KYNDI that really push the state of the art of what's possible with AI and machine learning. The most important piece, though, is just one fundamental line: is turning one analyst into four.
Okay.
And it's that kind of amplified intelligence that what you see from using these capabilities. And if there's one line that I would want everyone to go home with, it's kind of use our system, and it's turning one analyst into four.
Yeah, I really like that. That's I think especially if you talk about defense budgets and also efficiency, they use that a lot, business terms, if you will.
Yeah.
I'm just going to kind of skip get down to just a couple questions. I think you've talked a little bit. Let's talk about one point here, and the future of kinetic cyber and electronic warfare. Where do you think that's heading?
Yeah, cyber.
That's a big one. I'm putting you on the spot now.
So cyber is an interesting field to think about. I mean, it opens up. A lot of the people on our team and a lot of the mathematicians that I meet throughout my academic life and then professional life, they always seem to cluster around cyber.
Yes,
and
right.
It's an interesting space. But as far as automating analysis of networks, automating attacks on networks, automating defense of networks, I mean, a lot of that stuff can be streamlined using artificial intelligence. And what gets really interesting is when you start to measure distances in cyberspace. So that becomes important, and again, it comes back to network structures and graph structures. And a lot of these things are just kind of unknown unknowns out there. But if you can then bring them back to a structure, you can work with that structure and really identify where the causal relationships between things versus the correlation between things, which Stats 101 is. Correlation is not causation.
That's really a good point as well. Well, I wanted to make this as brief as possible because I know you're extremely busy. So, what's one thing you want to leave with people in regards to your company and basically your business model and what you're seeking to provide in a sense of predictive decision making?
Yeah, actually, you ended on a phrase that I want to draw a distinction. This idea of predictive decision making, and I argue that we as human beings are not predictive; we're actually anticipatory, right? Which is more cognitive and more complex than being predictive. In the prediction is driving your car forward, looking in the rearview mirror.
Yep.
You've seen the movie before, you can model it out statistically, and hopefully you can predict the next step. But anticipation is really having context and meaning, and walking into each situation and being anticipatory about things. And I draw that distinction because that's the distinction that we make here at KYNDI, is we've taken these steps to build algorithms that are anticipatory in nature and not statistical in nature, enabling us to work with context, meaning, a deeper, richer picture of what's about to unfold, and then serving up those possible future states to the analyst ultimately to make a decision on possible future states. So it's great algorithms. I argue that we're the best in the world working with unstructured data. So if you want to turn one analyst into four, we're the people to work with.
Right. Well, I want to. We're going to end on that because that's pretty exciting. I want to thank you very much for taking time with GMC Stream TV and our premium subscribers, and really enjoyed this opportunity. And of course, now that I know you're in Silicon Valley, I might be knocking on your door.
That's right.
So thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.